James Mercer Langston Hughes was born on February 1st, 1902 in Joplin, Missouri. His parents, James Hughes and Carrie Langston, separated soon after his birth, and his father moved to Cuba and then eventually to Mexico. While Hughes' mother moved around during his youth, Hughes was raised primarily by his grandmother, Mary, until she died in his early teens. Her tales impressed upon Hughes the nobility of black people and the importance of stoicism, and even laughter in the face of hardship. Hughes wrote, "Through my grandmother's stories, always life moved heroically toward an end. Nobody ever cried in my grandmother's stories. They worked, or schemed, or fought, but no crying. When my grandmother died, I didn't cry either. Something about my grandmother's stories taught me the uselessness of crying about anything." This use of humor as a shield from pain is present in Hughes' works in titles like Not Without Laughter and Laughing to Keep from Crying. After her death, he went to live with his mother. They moved to several cities before eventually settling in Cleveland, Ohio. It was during this time that Hughes first began to write poetry, and that one of his teachers first introduced him to the poetry of Carl Sandburg and Walt Whitman, of which Hughes would later cite as primary influences in his own works. In school, Hughes was a regular contributor to his school's literary magazine, frequently submitting to other poetry magazines, although in the end they would reject him. Hughes graduated from high school in Cleveland in 1920, and he would spend the following year in Mexico with his father. James Nathaniel Hughes had left the United States to escape racism, but also to distance himself from the African American community. Langston felt pride in his African American heritage, and he found the self-loathing that his father possessed to be baffling. In reference to his father's dislike of black culture, Hughes wrote, "I didn't understand it, because I was a Negro, and I liked Negroes very much." On the train ride down to Mexico, as the car crossed the Mississippi River, Hughes looked out of his window and thought of all that rivers had meant to black people, of the slaves sold down the river in the pre-Civil War South, and then the Euphrates and the Nile in Africa, and he wrote the poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. It was published in the Crisis magazine in 1921 and was highly praised. In 1921, Hughes returned to the United States and enrolled at Columbia University, where he studied briefly, and during which time he quickly became a part of the Harlem Renaissance. Hughes, however, dropped out of Columbia in 1922 and would go on to work various odd jobs around the New York area for the following year, before he would eventually then sign on as a steward on a freighter that would take him to Africa and Spain. He left the ship in 1924 and lived for a brief time in Paris, where he continued to develop and publish his poetry.